All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Maybe we could find a seat this morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Good. Well, I want to start off by saying, good morning, like I just said, but thank you for having me today. If you don't know me, my name's Jordan Zeke. I live over in Springfield, Missouri, and I'm over here preaching to you guys this morning, Sunday school and main service, so you get to hear from me twice. But I'm excited to be here, and so I just want to start off by saying thank you, and if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn it to Judges chapter 13. Today, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite judges. If you don't know the book of Judges, it's full of many different people who are put in Israel and are meant to judge those around them for the sake of Israel, as well as to judge Israel. And so we're going to be talking today about Samson. Now, if you haven't heard of Samson, he's probably the most famous of the judges because of one of his most notable traits, which is his strength. So if you've ever heard of Samson, you've probably heard about how strong he was and how amazing he was in that feat. But some other judges that are in this book are people such as Othniel, Ehud, Gideon, you got Samson, Abdon, Elon. You know, this book is full of many people who are meant to judge those around them. But today, we're going to talk about Samson, and I've entitled this message, Broken but Blessed. Because in my mind, Samson's one of those judges that it's kind of mysterious to me how he was doing and being a blessing when really he was. He was a guy who was making some questionable decisions in his life, but he was still considered one of the best judges in the book of Judges. So there's three things that I want to talk to you today about Samson. And the first thing that I want to talk to you about is that Samson knew his vow. So this might not mean anything to you right now, but we're going to explain what it means that Samson knew his vow. What does it mean that he knew his vow? Well, like I said, is that Samson, when he was born, his parents, before he was born, were barren. They couldn't have children. They couldn't have anybody, and so all of a sudden, an angel of the Lord came to them and told them that they were going to have a son, and that he was going to be of the Nazirite people. So meaning he was going to have the vow of a Nazirite. Now, that vow is what we're talking about here. Samson knew the vow that he was destined for at the very beginning of his birth. So after he was born, he went under this vow. Now, the Nazirite vow is found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, which I'll read to you, and then I'll explain it a little bit more. So Numbers chapter 6, 1 through 8 says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When either man or woman shall separate themselves to vow a vow of a Nazirite, to separate themselves unto the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar, or wine, or vinegar, or strong drink, neither shall he drink any liquors of grape, nor eat moist grapes or dried. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husk. All the days of his vow of his separation, there shall no razor come upon his head until the days be fulfilled, in which he separateth himself unto the Lord. He shall be holy, and shall let the locks of his hair, or of the hair of his head grow. All the days that he separateth himself unto the Lord, he shall come at no dead body. He shall not make himself unclean for his father, or for his mother, or for his brother, or for his sister when they die, because the consecration of his God is upon his head. All the days of his separation he is holy unto the Lord." Now, that was a lot of verses, and it said a lot of things, and it repeated a lot of different things. But really what this is saying is, for somebody to take a Nazirite vow, they are separating themselves and saying, yes, I'm going to abide by the laws of Israel, but I'm doing a little bit more, and I'm separating myself to do this for God. And so what they're doing is they're separating themselves from three main things. Number one is they're separating themselves from the vine and everything that comes from it. That's grapes, that's wine, that's all of these different things that come from the vine. Number two is that they're staying away from dead bodies and they can't go near them. It even goes as far as to say that they can't be defiled by their dad, their mom, their brother, their sister, or anybody when they die. They can't go near them. So they can't do anything with that. So you've got the things from the vine, the dead bodies, and then number three is that they made this vow that they would not cut their hair. And so Samson is considered under this vow. In Judges 13, in verse 5, this is before he was born, this is the angel of the Lord talking to Samson's mother. It says, "For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." So a Nazarite has this extra vow that they're putting themselves under, and they're really making sure that they are trying to do their best to separate themselves to make sure they are as holy as possible before God. And that's what Samson is supposed to do. That's what Samson is under. From the very beginning, it says from his birth, he was to be a Nazarite. And we know that this continued because his parents had a conversation about it. If you want to go and read 13, it talks about all their conversation between them, and then they have another conversation with this angel of the Lord, and they really know, hey, he's going to be under this vow. And even them, they were under, or she was at least under that vow during the time of his birth, or the pregnancy, because she had to make sure that he remained under that vow the entire time. So, we know that Samson knew his vow. We can understand that his parents probably taught him this vow because, as a child's growing up, it's usually the parents' responsibility to cut the child's hair, to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, to make sure, that all of these different things. And so maybe if he was growing up or something, people were getting their haircuts or whatever it was, and he might have asked, why am I not getting my hair cut? But we can usually assume is that his parents were teaching him about this vow that he was under. And not only that, but they were also teaching him the laws of Israel that he was supposed to remain under on top of that. Not only can we assume that his parents who trusted God, who worshiped God, who understood what God was telling them in chapter 13, we can believe that they were teaching him, but we also know that he understands his vow, because in Judges 16, verse 17, this is him talking to Delilah, in which we'll get into who Delilah is in a little bit. But in Judges 16:17, it says that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, "There hath not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." So the first thing that I want us to realize about Samson before we even get into his life and his story and what he did is, number one, he knew his vow. He knew what he was supposed to be doing. He understood his role, he understood his purpose, and he understood that he is a man set apart in this Nazirite vow to be something more than every other Israelite is supposed to be. We can see that. So the first thing that I wanted us to realize is that he knew his vow, but the second thing I need us to realize about Samson is that he broke his vow. That even though he was under this vow and he was supposed to do all these different things, there are many different times in which he broke that vow. The first instance that we see that he broke his vow was specifically with the lion that he killed himself. Now, it's not necessarily the thing of the lion killing that and being near that dead body. That's not the issue, but we'll read this story real quick in Judges 14, starting in verse 5. This is what it says. It says, "Then went Samson down, and his mother and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. And he had nothing in his hand, but he told his father and his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. So in this story, the beginning of this little incident is he's going down. He's going to find a wife, and he's got this wife that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But he's going down, and all of a sudden a lion comes to him. And it says that he's filled with the Spirit. The Spirit fills him, and that's the power that he's been given. Because he's under this vow, because he's obeying God, then he gets this power that God has given him. And it says that he rents or he kills this lion as easily as it would be to kill a child, which I know that's a very harsh, example. But at the same time think about how it'd be super easy, and that's how easy it was for him to take care of this lion. He didn't have anything in his hands, and he was able to beat it no problem. Now, that's not necessarily when he broke his vow, because he went and talked to his parents and told them about this, and they all agreed it was okay. But then it keeps going, and it says in verse 8, and after a time he returned to take her and to turn her aside and to see the carcass of the lion. So he's going back to his wife, or his future wife, and he sees this carcass. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took thereof in his hands, and he went on eating, and came to his mother and his father, and he gave them, and they did eat. And he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. This is when we see that he first breaks his Nazirite vow. And you might be saying, hey, that vow, it doesn't necessarily seem that it was talking about, dead animals. It's more talking about, people, because it talks about his mom, his dad, his brother and sister. But we know that being near dead carcasses is what makes an Israelite defiled. We see that in Leviticus 11:22. It says, even these of them that may eat the locust after his kind. Oh, wait, I put the wrong one in there. I'll pull it up. It talks about the different animals and how they are defiled before God and before the people of Israel, and how it gets them defiled. It says, whatsoever in Leviticus 11:27 says, whatsoever goeth upon his paws among all manner of beasts that go on all four, those are unclean to you. So things that are walking around on all fours, they're unclean. It says, whoso toucheth their carcass shall be unclean until the even. So we see that this Nazirite vow says you can't be near dead bodies. You can't be near these things. And then the Israelite law also says don't go near these specific bodies, these specific carcasses. And it has a whole list there. But specifically, one of the things is that lion. And so we see that he's broken his vow just right there. And once you've broken a vow, it's very hard to rekindle that vow and to make sure that, you are going back onto the things that matter. So we see, number one, that he's broken his vow because of that lion. Number two, and this one's a little bit more loose, but it's likely that he probably drank wine during his wedding celebration. So in Judges 14, 10 through 17, or 10 and 17, it talks about this wedding party that he goes to for himself. Now, at the beginning of 14, it says this. It says, and Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get for her from me to wife. And his father and his mother said, is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all thy people, that goest to take the wife of an uncircumcised Philistine? And Samson said unto his father, get her for me, for she pleaseth me. So right there, at the beginning of this story of him and his wife's relationship, is we know that Samson's an Israelite, and the Israelites are under the Philistines. They are controlled by the Philistines, and the Philistines rule over them. So for Samson to say, hey, Mom, Dad, I found this woman, and she's a Philistine, and I want to go be with her. I want her to be my wife. That's just absurd. Most Israelites, they married among each other rather than, going to marry the person that's ruling over them. And so we know that he was already willing to break the rules and break what was necessary and what was, usually done because of his desires. He simply says, "Go and get her for me, for she pleaseth me well." Just simply because he wanted her, Philistines were considered unclean to the Israelites, just like a carcass would be, just like anything else that was unclean. Same with the Philistines. And so for him to say, "I want to go be with this woman," we can assume is that in chapter 14, 10 and 17, where it says, "So his father went down to the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do." And then 17, where it's talking about, "She wept before him in the 7 days while their feast lasted." It says that they went and they had this wedding party. And this party was 7 days long. Now, in tradition with Philistines, this is a drinking party. This is not just some time of just, hey, we're going to pray all 7 days, we're going to hang out, and we're just going to enjoy each other. No, this is a week-long drinking party. And so for Samson to say, "I only want to be with her because she pleases me, and I only want her because she's the only one that I want," regardless of who she is, we can assume that he's okay with the customs that the Philistines were doing, that he's okay with doing whatever they decided they wanted to do. And that feast would be part of it. Now, I'm not going to say that this is without a doubt a time that he broke his vow. But I feel like there's a very strong possibility that he broke his vow there again. Because not only that, but it also talks about a story in which he kind of has this riddle for these guests at this party, and he has this kind of interactions with them that seems like he's partying, he's having a fun time, he's just trying to be silly and trying to enjoy his time, in which he was probably drinking. And so there's 2 things right there, that the Nazirite vow, which there's only 3 things, and he's already done 2 of them. So not only did he touch a carcass of a dead animal, but he also probably drank wine. The third thing that he also did was he got his hair cut. Now, this story is in Judges 16, 17 through 20. And I'm going to read it, but then I want to talk about it for a minute. It says that he told, we had read this verse already, but it says that he told her all his heart and said, "There hath not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazirite unto God from my mother's womb. If I have shaven, and my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man." So I'm going to stop right there and just explain to you, if you don't know, Delilah is this girl that he's infatuated with, that he loves, that he wants to be with, but she has tried 3 separate times to get him killed, to get him captured. Because she's tied him up, she's tied him up a couple times, she's done all of these different things in which he has said, "Hey, that's my weakness. This is what I can't do, or else my strength is gone." And so finally she comes to him, she's crying, she's saying, "Man, do you not care about me? Tell me your weakness." And he starts telling her, "Hey, I'm a Nazirite. I can't cut my hair or it's all gone." It says, "And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, 'Come up this once, for he hath showed me all his heart.' Then the lords of the Philistines came upon her and brought money in their hand. They paid her for giving them this information. It says she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. She said to the Philistines, 'Be upon thee, Samson.' And he awoke out of his sleep, and he will go out as any other time and shake myself. And he wist not, or he knew not, that the Lord had departed from him." So right there we see that the final vow of his Nazirite vow was broken. Now, the argument can be made he didn't cut his own hair. No, but he talked to this woman who he knew wanted him killed, wanted him captured, because each and every time she tried to capture him, she tried to call upon her people, who are also Philistines. She said, "Hey, come get him, I've got him." And he had to kill them each and every time. And so he knew her purpose, he knew what she was there for, he understood why she was asking him. And so for somebody to say, "Well, it wasn't him that cut his hair," no, but he allowed it to happen. He understood, if I tell her this, she's going to do it. Because I've told her 3 other things that were lies, and she did it. So why would she stop right now? he understood that if I tell her this, that's what's going to happen. So it says, we know that he broke his Nazirite vow a couple different times. Now, not including those times, there's also different times in which he got upset. He went and he killed 50 men because of the riddles that he was telling at his wedding party. They got him right, and so he owed them some clothes. So he killed 50 men, took their clothes. He also said that he killed a bunch of other men because his first wife, her dad, gave her away, and so he went and killed a bunch of Philistines. It talks about 1,000 Philistines that he killed with the jawbone of a donkey. All of these different times in which he was used by God, but he still, in one way or another, broke his vow. So the two first things that we need to see about Samson is, number one, that he knew his vow. He knew what his life was meant for. He knew his purpose. But number two, he still broke that purpose. He still broke the vow in which he had taken. Because this wasn't just, hey, my parents told me this. We know because he told Delilah is saying he lived by that. In his mind, he was still abiding by that vow. Because he said, I've been a Nazirite unto God from my mother's womb. I have lived that out. The last thing that I want us to realize about Samson, and I know that, I'll get you guys out of here early, but the last thing I want us to realize about Samson is number 3, is that Samson was still used by God. Regardless of if he knew his vow, regardless of if he broke his vow, he was still one of the most well-known judges that God used. Like I had said about the different times that he killed men, in Judges 14:19 is one of those examples. And it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and slew 30 men of them and took their spoil and gave change of the garments unto them, which expounded the riddle. First time that we see it is we see that the power came over him with the lion, but then first time we see his kind of actions against the Philistines is right here, is, hey, the Lord came upon him and he slew 30 Philistine men. He went and these Philistines, they made his wife trick him and made his wife figure out what the answer was. He seems to be getting tricked by these Philistine women all the time. But the first instance is he goes and he asks this riddle at this seven-day long drinking party, and the riddle is, hey, what is super strong but something comes out sweet from it? It's along those lines. You can read it. It's there in 14. But the answer was the lion that he killed with the honey in it. And his wife told her family, the Philistines, about that riddle. And so him, out of anger, went and killed 30 Philistine men, just like he was supposed to do. Not only that, but in Judges 15:7-8, it says, and Samson said unto them, though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. And he smote from hip and thigh with great slaughter, and he went down and dwelt on the top of the rock of Etam. He slayed even more Philistines, because he started off with his wife, with this 7-day drinking party with the riddles and slaying those guys. And then her dad said, wow, he's probably really upset that you lied to him, so go be with this other guy. And he gets upset about that, so he goes and slays more Philistines. And every single time something like this happens, he keeps slaying Philistines. After that, then the people of Israel come to him and say, hey, why'd you kill those guys? That's not very good. Now they're all going to come after us, and now they're going to come after you. And so 1,000 men come after him in Judges 15:14-16, and it says, and when he came unto Lehi, and the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. And he found a jawbone of an ass, and put forth his hand, and took it, and slew 1,000 men wherewith. So he killed all of these men. Each and every time he ends up messing up. He ends up doing something that's wrong. He touched this carcass and he made a joke out of it. He made a riddle, and he still was able to slay Philistines because of it. He chose this Philistine wife, and because of his riddle, she was passed somewhere else, and he, because of that wife, got angry and went and killed more people. And then because he killed those people, the Israelites chained him up so that way he would be set as a sacrifice to appease their anger, and he was able to kill all those Philistines. Each and every time that we see Samson failed, we see that he still gets used. The last time that we see him get used is at the very end of his life. It's that when he slew more in his final sacrifice than he ever did while he was alive. So the whole story of Samson is, we've got his first marriage, we've got him slaying all these people, and then he meets Delilah, and Delilah is trying to figure out his weakness, and she's a Philistine trying to help out her people, saying, man, he's an enemy. He's clearly taking out so many people just by himself. He can do it without, weapons. He's used the jawbone of a donkey this last time, and so he's clearly more powerful than all of us. Tell us his secret. So she tries to figure it out over and over and over again, and he realizes that and finally gives in and tells her. And then they come in and they take him because he's weak, his power is gone, and they take him and they chain him up. And then this is what it says in Judges 16. We'll start in verse 23. It says, then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for the time of the offering of the great Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, for they said, our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. So they're having this huge party. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass when their hearts were merry, and that they said, call for Samson, that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison, and they made him sport, that they set him between two pillars, put his arms up and chained him between two pillars. And says Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. So he's thinking ahead, saying, make it so that I can touch these pillars. Find me two close ones. I want to feel them. Just please help me with that. It says, now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld Samson made sport. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me. I prayed thee and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once. O God, that I may be once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes, because they plucked his eyes out. It says, and Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was bore up, and the one on his right hand and the other in his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than that which he slew in his life. And his brethren and all the house of his father came up and took him and brought him up and buried him in Zorah and Eshtaol and the burying place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. So this is the end of Samson's life. He gets finally caught after all of his disobedience, after all of his, going against his vow and the Israelite law, after all of these different times. He's been used, and God has allowed him to be strong enough to slay every single person that he's come up against. Till finally, he gets caught, and now everybody's sitting there laughing at him, saying, we caught him, we got him, this is done. We're making him a sport, we're just making it fun to torture him, we're making it fun to beat him up, we're making it fun to do all these different things. And finally, Samson says, God, use me one last time. You're the one who has given me power this entire time. I know that. But use me one last time so that I can avenge myself against these Philistines. And finally, he tears down the temple and he tears down this house, and it says that there were about 3,000 people there. And if we add up the number of people that he killed while he was alive, the 1,000, the 50, the other couple that he slew, it was not near 3,000. So his very last act of judgment upon these Philistines was to kill more in that last act than he has his entire life. And so the question always arises is, why is he such a good judge? What's the point? Because he disobeyed God so many different times. He went against his vow. He went against the Israelite law. He tried to be with two different Philistine women. He tried to do all of these different things. how is that being used by God? Well, just because he's messed up, just because he's failed, just because he's done all these different wrong things, doesn't mean that God wasn't glorified and used through it all. Yes, he knew what he was supposed to do. Yes, he understood his vow. He understood where he stood before God, and he still broke it. But that doesn't mean that God wasn't still glorified. So today, what I want to encourage you with this morning is simply that, I'm not going to say that his choices and that the things that he did to break that law and that vow is good in any way. It's not. It's not good. It shouldn't be glorified. It shouldn't be lifted up because of the decisions he made. But what should be lifted up is that the Philistine people were taken out. That he killed so many different people for the sake of God to try and help free the Israelite people. That's what at the very beginning he was supposed to even do. It says that in 13:5, it says, "For the child shall be a Nazirite, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines." That was his entire purpose in life. That's what God had said he's going to use him for. So just because he messed up, just because he disobeyed, just because he did all these things, doesn't mean that God wasn't there through it all. Doesn't mean that God wasn't glorified through everything. Now again, I'm not going to say anything that he did was good, and I'm not going to say any sins that you do are good. But what I will say is, just because we mess up, we don't need to beat ourselves up so hard. We just need to make sure that God is glorified through everything. Yes, we mess up. Yes, we're sinners. Yes, that is an inevitable fact, is that we are going to sin, we're going to mess up. But we need to make sure that we are still pointing to God when we mess up. Yes, I failed in this area, but man, God helped me get to that. He helped me get through that. Yes, I failed in this area, but man, I was able to talk to somebody about God. I was able to do this for God. Samson understood what his vow set him apart to do, yet he still broke it. There's many times in our lives, if we're believers, if we're Christians, we know what we're supposed to do. We've read the Bible. We know what God has told us we're supposed to do, but we still deliberately break that law. The two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And we break those two all the time. We don't glorify God like we were supposed to. We don't worship him like we're supposed to. We don't love our neighbors like we're supposed to. We're doing all of these different things knowing that we are sinning. Yet God is still working in all of our lives. Even though we mess up, even though we fail, God can still be glorified. Even though bad things happen, even though things that we don't have control over happen, even though things that we don't even know about happen, God is still in control and God is still glorified. Just like Samson, he messed up. But at the very end, it doesn't talk about all the different areas in which he failed. It doesn't talk about all the different things in which he'd done. It says that his brethren and all the house of the father came down, took him up, buried him with his dad, and he judged Israel 20 years. It talks about just what he did for God. It doesn't say, man, Samson messed up here, he messed up here, he messed up here. It just says he judged Israel for 20 years. He was the judge in Israel for 20 years. So this morning, if there's a sin that's in your life, or is coming at you, or there's different circumstances that you have, or different things that are going on that you're thinking, man, how am I supposed to glorify God through this? How am I supposed to find praise? How am I supposed to worship through this? Even with all the fires going on. I mean, like I said, I'm from Springfield, Missouri, and so coming back here yesterday, it was just horrible to see home just in flames and up in smoke, and it's a horrible thing. And yes, it's a bad thing, but God can still be glorified through it. Think about all the different people that have been helped because of it. Yes, they've lost things, and we're going to pray for them, and we want to continue to help them, but God can still be glorified in every situation. So that's why I want to encourage you guys with this morning. I'm going to pray, and then we've got about 25 minutes until the main service, and so I hope you stick around, and I'm excited for the next service, all right? Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this morning, and just thank you that I get to be here and to be able to just worship with this family and just to worship with these people, Lord. And just thank you for allowing me to have a safe trip here. And today we just want to be in prayer just for all the fires that are going around with Medical Lake, with Elk, with up near Canada, with Maui. Just everywhere's a mess right now. And we know that a lot of people know somebody who's been affected by these fires. And so just we want to be a blessing to them. We want to help them. We want to be Christ to them. And so help us to remember to love on them and to be there for them when they need us, Lord. And help us to remember, just like Samson, we may mess up, but you can still be glorified through it all, Lord. And so help us to live that throughout our lives. And we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.